I always thought death was like blowing out a candle. A sudden darkness, a complete end, a silence that would never be broken again. But something deeply unsettled me. What if the last breath isn't the end? What if, in the very first moments, after the heart stops beating, something continues? These questions wouldn't leave my mind. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up with a tight chest, as if I were hearing a whispering call in the dark. It was during one of those moments that I did something I had never done before with such sincerity. I spoke out loud. Jesus, what really happens in the first minutes after we die? I need to know. It wasn't mere curiosity, it was something deeper. It was a longing for peace, for truth, for understanding. I closed my eyes and remained silent. I waited, and to my surprise, something inside me began to stir. It wasn't a reply in words, it was more like a presence that enveloped me, as if saying, "You're ready to see what most people don't dare to face." In that moment, everything around me seemed to vanish. The room I was in became distant. I felt weightless, as if I were being carried. Not physically, but spiritually. It was as if Jesus was showing me something that can only be grasped when you fully surrender. And then, like my eyes were opened from within, a vision began to form. Not just an ordinary vision, but a living understanding. It was the beginning of something that would forever change how I see death, and more importantly, life. Because the first minutes after death are not the end. They are, in truth, the beginning of something unimaginably real. The first thing I noticed was the silence. But it wasn't ordinary silence, the kind you feel when you turn off the lights or step away from the city noise. It was a living silence, a silence that spoke, and in that place, which wasn't physical but neither was it a dream, I realized something even stranger. There was no time. I couldn't tell whether seconds or hours had passed, but what I felt was crystal clear. I was on the other side. Jesus didn't speak a single word, but he was guiding me. His presence was like light, and at the same time, like an anchor keeping me from getting lost. And then he allowed me to see. I saw a soul. I have no better way to explain, just departed from the body. The body was still there, lifeless, but something was detaching. Light as the wind, yet full of memories, emotions, everything it had lived. And in that moment, I understood something that gave me chills. The soul knows it has died. But at the same time, it doesn't understand what's happening. There is confusion. A search for answers. Many don't immediately realize they've left the earthly life. Some try to touch their loved ones. Others scream, but no one hears. And it is at that exact moment, in those first minutes, that something decisive happens. Lights begin to appear. Some soft and welcoming, others denser, distant, as if waiting for a choice yet to be made. Jesus showed me that, at that moment, angels draw near. They come in silence, but with a very clear purpose, to take the soul to the place it chose during life. Yes, chose. Because eternity isn't imposed. It is the result of the decisions we made while we were still breathing, and that pierced me, deeply. How many people are departing this very moment without knowing where they are going? How many believed they'd still have time to change? Later? Jesus said nothing, but his gaze said everything. As I watched that soul, freshly freed from the body, something became even more evident. It was as if the spiritual place where it was reacted to what was inside it. If there was faith, true repentance, love, a light approached. But if there was rejection, pride, bitterness, what manifested was entirely different. And that shocked me, because there were no masks there. Nothing was hidden. Everything was laid bare before eternity. I saw a man. He had just passed away. Still looked stunned, trying to understand where he was, looking around, searching for his wife, his children, calling their names. But no one responded. And then two paths began to form before him. On one side, a warm, peaceful light. On the other, a dense, silent shadow. but strangely attractive. The man hesitated, and then something terrifying happened. He was drawn not by the light, but by what he carried within himself. Jesus whispered to my heart, "Eternity does not force us, it only reflects what we nurtured." That hit me like thunder. Many times, we imagine that at the end, God will line everyone up, point his finger and decide heaven or hell. But Jesus was showing me, it's not like that. The decision has already been made. While we are still alive, what happens in the first minutes after death is simply the consequence of how we lived every second before it. But I also saw something that gave me hope. An elderly woman, eyes closed, body lifeless in a hospital. But her soul, oh, how it glowed. She opened her spiritual eyes and smiled. She knew where she was going, and she was received by two heavenly beings. They called her by name. And she responded with peace, like someone returning home. That scene brought tears to my eyes, because right then I understood. Death is not an end, it's a mirror. It only reveals where the heart was already headed. Jesus allowed me to see something even more intense, the exact moment when a person realizes they can no longer return. It's a moment of brutal revelation. The soul tries to touch the body, tries to reconnect with earthly life, but can't. The screams become mental, the movements produce no sound. And then comes the full awareness of eternity. A young woman appeared before me, her eyes wide open, as if she had just woken up from a nightmare. She was looking at her own body on the ground, the victim of an accident that took her life in seconds. She didn't seem to understand. She wanted to call the paramedics, wanted to go home, wanted to call her mother. But no one could hear, no one could see. No one could feel her presence. And then came the most terrifying moment. She looked upward, and there it was. An opening, a tear between two realms. From within that spiritual rift, two distinct presences approached. Iman was radiant, calm, full of peace. The other, shadowy, unsettling, standing at a distance, merely watching. It was in that instant that I realized something chilling. Spiritual forces do not take anyone by force. They simply draw near. And the soul walks naturally toward the one it most identifies with. Then Jesus spoke to me with a loving firmness. That's why I said, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Matthew 6:21. The problem isn't where you died. It's where your heart was while you lived. The young woman hesitated. She was torn. She seemed to recall moments when she heard about God, about salvation. But there were also wounds, doubts, resentments she carried like invisible chains. And when her hesitation lasted too long, the light pulled away, the shadow came closer, and she was taken. Not by force, but by consequence. That's when I understood. The time to decide is not after death. It's now. One of the most striking things Jesus revealed to me was that memory remains alive after death. The soul retains its memories with overwhelming clarity. Everything that was said, thought, desired comes back in full force. And not just the beautiful moments, also the forgotten ones, the neglected, the hidden. I saw a scene that shook me. An elderly man, peaceful appearance, serene face. He had just passed away in his sleep. No physical pain, no struggle. But when his soul awoke in the spiritual realm, what he saw was not peace. It was a flood of memories. Words he had spoken with contempt. Lies he had hidden his whole life. People he had hurt. The good he could have done, but didn't. He tried to escape those visions, but it was impossible. They surrounded him, enveloped him, accused him without a single word being spoken. Then Jesus gently said, "For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks." Luke 6:45. And at that moment I understood. In eternity, there is no pretending. What's inside us will be revealed, not as punishment, but as justice, as truth. This man wasn't a murderer, nor someone the world would label as evil. But he lived his life without God, without repentance, without seeking forgiveness. And now he could change nothing. Everything he had done stood before him like an undistorted mirror. Then Jesus showed me another soul, a woman who had also died in her sleep. But what she felt upon awakening was different. She remembered the moment she gave her life to Christ. She remembered the tears of repentance, the decision to forgive those who had hurt her, the days when she chose love, even when no one loved her back. And then, instead of judgment, there was celebration. Angels drew near with smiles, and an indescribable peace surrounded her. Her memory was filled with light. That's when I realized that the true treasure in life lies in the eternal choices we make every day, because death doesn't erase who we are. It simply reveals us completely. In that state of deep revelation, Jesus showed me something that is often misunderstood. Judgment after death is not like a human court. There's no bureaucracy, no paperwork, no defense attorney trying to negotiate a verdict. There's only one thing, truth. I saw a soul that had just crossed over, a man who had lived between faith and doubt. He was someone who occasionally went to church, claimed to believe in God, but his life was full of contradictions. He was surprised to realize he was outside his body, but the greatest shock came when he understood that nothing could be hidden at Yai. That instant, a powerful light enveloped him. Not a burning light, but one that exposed everything. And Jesus helped me understand that this was what many call judgment. Not an imposed sentence, but the unveiling of the heart before God, every thought, every intention, every decision. All of it was there, alive, pulsing before him. There was no way to lie, no excuse to make, because right there, in that moment, he knew. He knew when he was careless. He knew when he chose darkness, even knowing the right path. He knew he had ignored God's call countless times out of convenience. Then Jesus said something that pierced me like a sword. "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" Luke 6:46. That broke me inside. I realized that often we live a shallow religiosity. We speak of faith, but don't truly surrender. We want heaven, but not the Lord of heaven, and in the moment of death, that becomes clear. Because before Christ, it's not the mouth that speaks. It's the heart. But not everything was sorrow. Jesus showed me a soul that lived in humility. She was a simple woman, almost invisible in the eyes of the world, but her heart, it belonged entirely to him. When she awakened on the other side, the light that enveloped her felt like a father embracing his beloved daughter. And then I understood. Judgment is not about how many good deeds you've done. It's about who you became, whether you walked with Christ or without him. Jesus then led me to see a place many refer to as a valley, but not a physical one, rather a spiritual transitional state where many souls arrive shortly after death. There were no walls, but also no doors. It wasn't heaven, and it wasn't hell. It was a point of final revelation, where the soul confronts its own eternity. I saw hundreds, maybe thousands, of spirits there. Some were sitting, as if waiting for something. Others wandered in circles, restless, confused, like those who don't understand what's happening. And there were those who already knew. It was then that Jesus said to me, with a look of compassionate sorrow in his eyes, "This is the place where many realize they postponed what could only be done in life." A shiver ran through my body. In the valley, the soul sees everything clearly, the moments it was touched by God. The sermons it heard, the silent warnings it ignored, the invitations it rejected, out of pride or convenience. And there's something more. The valley is not a place for decisions. There, the choice has already been made. It is merely the final echo of a life lived with or without God. I saw a young man. He had just died in a fight. When he arrived in the valley, his eyes were wide open, as if waiting for a second chance. But there, time no longer exists. There is no turning back. He realized he believed in eternity, but thought it was far away. And then Jesus said something that broke me inside. "Some say they will seek me later, but death doesn't ask if you're ready." I also saw a woman, kneeling, crying. She knew where she was going. And it wasn't to the light. She wasn't screaming about injustice. She was crying out in regret for having wasted every chance she had, and in the valley, there are no more excuses. It's where the spirit finally understands that life was the rehearsal for eternity, and that eternity had already begun long before death. Until that moment, Jesus had shown me many hard, necessary truths. But now, he led me to something that made my heart feel warm. He showed me what happens to those who sincerely love him, to those who live with a surrendered heart, who, despite their flaws, choose to walk with him day by day. It was like walking through a mist. On the other inside, I saw a different kind of light. It was soft, warm, familiar. And then I saw a soul arriving, as if just released from the physical body. It was a simple man, humble in appearance. He had died in his sleep, but his spiritual awakening was a celebration. There were 2 angels, standing and waiting for him. But not just angels, there were people, yes, people he had loved. People who had already passed, and had been saved by Christ. They were there, waiting for him. I couldn't hold back my emotions. There was no sadness. There was no fear. There was a reunion, a hug that human words could never describe. Then, a golden flash filled everything around. Jesus appeared before that man, not as a judge, but as a friend. With a tender smile, he said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." Matthew 25:21. In that instant, I saw what true heaven was. It wasn't just made of golden streets or pearly gates. It was made of presence, the living presence of Christ, and that was more than enough. That man's soul was filled with a joy that doesn't exist on earth. It was as if everything he had suffered in this life had become light, insignificant, because now he was home. Jesus looked at me, and with sweetness whispered, "Whoever walks with me is not afraid of death, because I am the life." At that moment I understood. Death only frightens those who don't know the one who defeated it. Then Jesus showed me something that left me speechless. There are people who, even in their final seconds of life, are touched by grace. Not because they deserve it, but because they cry out with sincerity. I saw a man, a heart attack victim. His heart stopped suddenly without warning. There was no time for goodbyes or confessions. But in the moment he felt life slipping away. With tear-filled eyes and a panicking soul, he murmured, with the last strength he had, "Jesus, forgive me!" That phrase pierced the veil between worlds, and it was heard in heaven. When his soul detached from his body, it wasn't welcomed with celebration. But it was welcomed with mercy. Jesus appeared before him, and that man fell to his spiritual knees, knowing he had nothing to offer. No deeds, no time, no clean past. But Jesus lifted him, and with eyes full of compassion said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Luke 23:43. The same phrase he had spoken to the thief on the cross. It was then that I understood once again, something that changes everything. God never rejects a broken heart, never, even if it's in the last second. But Jesus also showed me something else. Not everyone cries out, not everyone repents. Some depart with a hardened heart. Even knowing death has come, they choose to deny, to mock, or simply not believe. And when the soul leaves the body with that weight, it moves away from the light not because it's pushed, but because it cannot bear to stand before the truth. It always refused. That broke my heart. Jesus looked at me and said, "My sacrifice was for everyone, but only those who believe receive it. Eternity is open, but the key is in the heart, and the time to use that key is now, not later, not tomorrow, now." Then Jesus led me to a dimension I had never imagined until that moment, the spiritual. Marks we carry. Yes, even though no one sees them with physical eyes, every attitude, every thought, every choice leaves a mark on the soul. And the moment we leave the body, those marks either shine or scream. I saw a man who had lived constantly in giving to others. He wasn't famous, he had never stood on a church pulpit, but he carried an invisible glow that now revealed itself. Every time he forgave, every time he helped in secret, every silent prayer, every tear shed alone in his room, with no one else knowing, it was all recorded in light. His soul bore scars, but not of pain. They were signs of spiritual battles. They were invisible medals. Angels drew near and honored that man, not because of wealth, fame, or human accomplishments, but because his life had been a living letter written by God. And Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Matthew 5:8. But I also saw the opposite. A young woman who had spent her life crafting a flawless image. Perfect profiles on social media, a reputation built with care. But inside, she hid envy, pride, resentment, arrogance. And when she died, her soul could no longer hold up the mask. It all fell away, it was exposed, and the image the world adored held no weight in eternity. Jesus made me understand. The soul screams what the heart whispered in life. No one deceives heaven. No one manipulates eternity. No one enters God's presence through image, but through the truth carried within their spirit. Death, then, is not the end. It is the unveiling. It is when we finally see what was always hidden, even from ourselves. After all I witnessed, every soul in transition, every light being received, every shadow being claimed, I remained silent. There were no questions, only a deep sense of responsibility. Jesus looked at me, not with condemnation, but with a love that wounds by the truth it carries. And then he said, "Now you know, and whoever knows has the responsibility to speak." It felt like a burden, but also like a calling. What Jesus showed me wasn't meant to feed curiosity. It wasn't to build theories or create mysticism. It was to awaken hearts, to remind us that eternity is real, and more than that the present matters. Every choice made today, every forgiveness you withhold, every life-giving word you silence, every opportunity to love that you delay, is writing the first chapter of your eternity. Jesus made me feel, with undeniable clarity, that heaven is not earned by merit, but received through surrender. Hell is not punishment. It's the result of voluntarily distancing oneself from God. And the most decisive moment in our story is not death, but the moment we say yes or no to Christ. As he spoke, tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of urgency. I thought of the people I love, of those living as if they'll never die, of those who think they can leave God for later. But what if later never comes? What if the first minutes after death only reveal what we left behind? Jesus touched my shoulder and said, "I keep knocking at the door, but few have heard the sound." Revelation 3:20. And in that moment, I understood it wasn't just a spiritual revelation, it was a loving warning. Because heaven is real, hell is too. But the greatest gift is knowing the door of salvation is still open, after everything I saw, felt, and understood. A question began to echo within me like a silent thunder. What if it were today? What if, without warning, my heart stopped beating? If I closed my eyes right now, where would my soul be taken? What would my thoughts say about me? What would my decisions reveal? What would my intentions, the ones no one ever saw, scream before God? That question is not just mine, it's yours too, because death is the one event in life no one escapes. But eternity, that you can choose. Jesus didn't show me all this to frighten me, he showed it to wake me up. And maybe to wake you up too. He made me realize that living as if death were far away is humanity's greatest deception. Eternity begins the moment the heart chooses who it will walk with, and it can be light or darkness, a reunion or separation. Maybe you're hearing all of this now with a heavy heart, perhaps feeling that you're too far gone, that you've made too many mistakes, that you've wasted too much time. But let me tell you what Jesus made absolutely clear. There's still time. If you're still breathing, the door is still open. He doesn't want to judge you. He wants to receive you, to restore you, to transform you, to prepare you for what comes next. Because yes, there is something after this, and the question isn't if you will die. It is, are you ready? Heaven is not for the perfect, it's for the repentant. For those who choose to walk with Jesus, even if it's right now, even if it's through tears, even if you don't know where to begin, if today were your last day, if these were your first moments after death, would you be in his hands or lost in the shadows of your own refusal. Jesus is here, right now, knocking at the door. Not with condemnation, but with love. Eternity is waiting for you, but you're the one who decides where you'll go. If this message touched you in any way, don't ignore it. Share this video with someone you love. It might be the very word they needed to hear before it's too late. Leave a comment. Jesus, open my eyes too. And if you want to keep receiving messages like this, ones that speak directly to your spirit, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because this journey with God is just beginning.